Yeah, yeah, already, yeah, already, yeah. I was thinking about that. The book. I've seen it both Ken Pullman and Pullman on the principles of digital audio, and I was just thinking about that the Boolean um, chart because I was just thinking about a little bit about some similarities of binary numbers. But when I was looking at it, I mean, there's like William Pullman, and there's Ken Pullman, and automatically I'm thinking about automatically, where's the Colonel, where's the Colonel Sanders, and all that programming and partitions involving like Ajax and all that black and white stuff and Abraham Lincoln Night Vision, Shadow Government Stargate program, and the bullying is kind of like it's kind of like you got to be kidding me, and now it's kind of like almost like the Blue Angels at the same time in pronunciation. And when I first started reading that book, okay, um, I read it. It's like I really liked it, but when I got on that bullying, I mean, it didn't quite, quite. It really wasn't as descriptive as identifying factors that actually, place its function or any method of procedure that would be how the chart is actually used. And it's kind of like a more of the figure it out yourself kind of like diagram. But the thing about the Boolean is kind of like I mean, if it's in my mind, it's almost like the prefix of the White House now. The BlueWing, the BlueWing. It's almost like a Wilson Phillips song. Um, and I'm not going to even finish it. But the thing with this is that the seat that's going on like right now, it seemed to be the best one that doesn't have the nose. It's called a noseless um, seat for like mountain bikes. Okay, and it's the wing. It's the one the rainbow. The I'll actually have to look at it if it's a wing X wing. In any case, it's the rainbow on the backside. I thought that was like really kind of cool. Anyway, so like I got it because um, yeah, it prevents all that unwanted like thing about when standing up that way. Yeah. So like anyway, so like I got that. Okay. So I'm thinking about that Wilson Phillips song now, and it's kind of like um, and what kind of like reminded me of that it was something about Wilson Phillips, and it's just now kind of clicking, uh, falling like a wing part, and it seemed to be like Trump saying something about make America great again, and what the difference between like 72 and COVID-19, or some idea of color of money, or a method of banking, or 1972, and it seemed to be going all the way back, um, seemingly of television programming. Yeah, yeah. What was way before what was on television, looking like towards the late 80s and early 90s. I think even over into the new millennium, the year 2000. At least in any case, like like reruns or whatever the case may be, like CSI Miami. Now seem to be like almost like the Van Halen song about a dreams, and using the Blue Angels, that has the six jets and the four jet formation and the five jet formation and the six jet formation. And I've only and when I was reading that chart about the Boolean, um, I mean it doesn't seem to have anything similar in my mind of like a mechanics lane. Mechanics lane as compared to um, I mean is it the real issue? If so, I mean, it's of Mercedes is what it's really getting to. And it's almost like that Wilson Phillips song, Falling Like Wing, yet at the same time, it's like going, something about 1972 and all the connectivity, like Austin Powers, and some of the information and even television programming. Similarly, the thing about even, the thing about the um, um, Marcus Welby and, Quincy. And here recently, the thing, it kind of seemed to be, I mean, the Apprentice thing about Donald Trump and the test of international electronic engineering. I mean, adding an apprenticeship. Okay, the thing with this is that all this information I've been referring to about world news, talking about covert mission. Um, at the time, I mean, I didn't even, that's the deal. Like with the coupon that I've been referring to several times, um, involving LASIK laser corrective eye surgery. In my mind, it's kind of like the thing about, color code in a way of, the eyes in the current resident, kind of having a little bit something back now, it's kind of like I'm actually had referred to information involving like Trump saying, make America great again. And, the colors of Great Britain, flag is the same as the United States, okay? And ultimately it got to like, 1972 and COVID ID 19, and a method of banking that way. And now it seemed to be like principles of digital audio. And I was just thinking about that because I focus predominantly a lot on binary numbers when I feel like it, as compared to proper English numerical composition about, why one pronoun of the 4 types of pronouns cannot be used as a subject. And sequencing characterization in sets of 4, like using 2 numbers like binary numbers is. And the idea of like, not really a match and identify, although, in practical application of principle based upon the description, applied to the last 4 of the Social Security Administration's number 12 and 13, being 12 and 13, being the alphanumerics of, or the L&M about Legal Media and Lockheed Martin. And it seemed that all this information, the Social Security Administration had led to, like a telepathic blueprint on the wall. Ultimately, think about the intersecting axis of like Lockheed Martin symbolic representation and like the font size between, the Rampart Emergency 51, between like Star Trek, and like Lockheed Martin in the font size and that way, and about the line. And it seemed to be the deal about Diners Club that way, involving quantum, because it had ultimately, right now it's kind of like the way things are actually, all the information and all around it's like realizing something about the coupon in Mercedes-Benz, in the duration. Likewise, in addition, like the SUVs come through Pearland and like brand new or used, there for a while. And it seemed to be, I was kind of like thinking about, somewhere between a calendar year and a fiscal annual of like normally a business as a point of origin, or a grand opening as a point of origin, as compared to the zodiac representing some idea of the Chinese calendar. I mean, the SUVs, and it seemed to be more that the SUVs was more along the lines of, I'm not sure if it's like a Motown thing, or 1972, Trump saying, make America great again, or Great Britain in the way of the color code of the flag. Ultimately, all the information that seemed to be 1972, and the information on television at the time, and it seemed to be the thing about like the Midnight Special. It's kind of like I was listening to, some of the Midnight Special songs that are on there, and ultimately it seemed to be whether or not if Jet Magazine, I mean, if it's really a Motown issue, or a COVID ID 19, or the 72 thing about, in my mind, COVID ID 19 is more about, a method of banking. Yeah, so it seemed to be, the similarities of like a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate for a deed restriction based upon television programming or litigation de facto or habeas corpus. Somewhere in my mind, kind of like a regulatory commission involving like comptrolling, and somewhere in my mind, comptrolling is in my mind somehow about insurance, and regulatory commission kind of involving annotation. And what ratifying and codifying constitutional law only seems to be, the thing about, even religion, hey, anyone like in North America speaking English can believe anything they want. Or the idea of like, hey, you can believe whatever you want and you still have a place to be, about that, yeah. And I mean, if the idea is accepted, or, what acceptance means in that way, well, I have something to say about that, but I already have in many ways. But the thing with this is kind of like, it seems to be that Boolean chart, when I was reading the principles of digital audio, I've seen Ken Pullman and William Pullman, and the thing about Ken Pullman seemed to be about, the kernel and the kennel. What that R is in proper English numerical composition. The kernel normally identifies, some idea of doesn't always identify it as like architecture and platform, or even the word that is the word between, architecture and platform being relation. And the only thing about, the kernel, or some idea of like the equator, or the operator, or the deal about, pronunciation involving alphanumerics and linguistics, and embedded encryption, it seemed to be getting to the point of whether or not, if like, why the Fifth Amendment is not a nonprofit organization, or why cryptocurrency is not Bitcoin, and all that information about certain factors that would all suggest why a student loan is not a Pell Grant. Yeah, I mean all these facts about information being combined, like normally like a U.S. patent, trademarks, and copyrights are normally the three that are like grouped together. Um, a lot of information like litigation, de facto, risk, yeah. Anyway, litigation, de facto, and res habeas corpus. The way it's all like grouped together, I mean, it almost gets to additives and preservatives and byproducts. And real quick, it seemed to be whether or not if a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate for a deed restriction based upon programming. I mean, if the whole entire point is distinguishing the difference whether or not, I mean, it seems this way about like monetary and domestic aggregates, and it seemed to be more along the side of like whether or not if it's going to be appreciation or depreciation only involving real estate of neighborhoods. It seemed to be more so than like gross national product being the commercial venue, living quarter, or some idea like how property is designated to be used, or some idea of like I don't know if I would really use deed restriction. I mean, if it's only the idea of a degreed or non-degreed issue, or some idea of like security clearance, or with the FDIC, it seemed to be more along the lines as a method of banking. In my mind, automatically like loss prevention in the form of more so of protecting, having fair use of what an endorsement means as a checking account, whether it's a known or not known fact of international law, what an easement is, and what the meaning and value is of like what possesses it and has that potential, or really is that, and managing it, not really even claiming ownership, seem to be the thing sometimes of intellectual property, and how that's used in that way. But the thing with this is that BooleanChart, it seemed to be a pronunciation thing. It seemed the BlueWing, the Boolean, what is that? That's 32. Okay, and it seemed to be now that the atonement of the Lockheed Martin, the two arrows with the 4 lines and the 3 intersecting lines. I mean, it's like green acres in my mind of like 2 dots, 2 points intersecting axis, then 3 lines, the exact opposite 3 lines, and then the 3 lines actually being 2 separate points. And in the beginning it's like there's like 2 lines having 2 lines for each point, okay, and it being that then 3 lines at the idea of like 1 point, and then 2 lines with 1 intersecting line between the 2. It still presents the interchangeability of like a telepathic blueprint on the wall based upon the shelf being used as some kind of Pentagon Reserve reverse, or intelligence and opposite, and it starts out with like absolute values based upon just looking at it from one side, straight back 180 to the exact opposite side, and all the alignments in it ultimately got to all the alignments about in my mind like the Fifth Dimension song, Up in the Air in a Beautiful Balloon, and ultimately the rainbow and Orion's performance monitor with the like once again the hot air balloons in the different colors, and mandatory requirements of condensation and evaporation based upon altitude and temperature that a hot air balloon actually creates. The mandatory requirements of a rainbow. But anyway, the color code that book, and it ultimately got to in my mind, whether or not if Marcus Welby and Quincy is just the idea somewhere between the monetary and domestic aggregates represents some idea of like quantum and like gross national product of the venues more so than the word building. I mean, building might give a lot of people like a lot of impression of either a departmental structure or some idea of a corporation. In my mind, the word is venue more so, and what a preliminary prejudice product registration of a birth certificate seems to be of some idea of like even an academic thing of separation between church and state, yet color coded, And it seemed to be like all the information involving now. I'm looking at the Boolean as some idea of like a airspace, and what that is to signal strength as compared to what seemed to be like within signal strength of only redundant frequency would be almost like identifier of how product and information is distributed. I mean, if it's really a factor based upon some idea of whether a product registration is a significance or a disregard as maybe neglect based upon lack of experience, or a claim as a loss prevention as some idea like with a who knows anyway form, and having use of information but not claiming ownership of it. um, and it seemed to go on and on, and now it's kind of like I was just thinking about the principles of digital audio. And Ken Pullman, it seemed to be the thing about the telekinetic roll of the pen, and the kernel in the way of like, Abraham Lincoln night vision shadow government Stargate program over that telekinetic roll of the pen, and the kernel being the kennel and kin and proper English numerical composition. And now it seems to be whether or not if the Boolean issue is just identifying an author based upon distribution of publication, only what networking seems to provide, and whatever the foreknowledge of performance monitoring is or is not. I mean, like really, I mean, it's going to be like really, I mean, a straightforward thing about it, and what that is as compared to maybe something that Lackland Air Force Base or LULAC would even consider, whether or not if it's just an idea of non-degreed, or maybe just not going to have anything good, directed towards a specific area based upon whether if it's a decision only based upon television programming or professional witnessing or some idea of like legal media or auditing. Well, this is what I have to say about it right now, because it seemed to be that the Blue Angels have like not limited to Ellington, but obviously even the California Angels, and involving even the color code, the uniform, as well as the Texas Rangers and like Nolan Ryan, okay, and all that information, that seemed to be the idea of like grayscale and like the initials and abbreviation for like audio video as compared to like Aryan Sky Latin, the AV being like audio video, and the S thing about wherever it's at. My thing about Aryan Sky Latin, the alphanumeric 213, and like my name, okay, and which are pretty that way. All that information about telepathic brainwave, Chevrolet Silverado, Z71, and all that. And I'm trying to like real quick place some brains in direction thinking about that Boolean, the BlueWing. And it's kind of like Wilson Phillips. I kind of like really think that that particular phrase. It seems to be like almost like COVID-19, and Trump saying make America great again. Like the U.S. $1 is like the Great Seal of the United States. Okay. And then like Great Britain has got the same color of the flag. But the thing is that I mean, somewhere in my mind with that chart, I was just thinking about it. I mean, if it's going to be like the idea of like whether or not if making a grade beyond local area, making a grade beyond internet protocol of a local area network is the only idea. Whether or not if the IP is the internet protocol, or the PI, the pi r squared. And now it seems to be the thing about Acura going on, with some idea not limited to and including, some idea that Jesus knew before the foundations of the earth, and ultimately getting to the thought of like Occupational Safety Health Administration. And the thing about McDonald's Golden Arches that way, of the Golden Arches, okay, both half cycles above, okay, like the equator or oscillation or the operator, and the one latitude, being the equator, and the thing about the 90 degree of it, having some idea of a point of origin in my mind's how true it is about military time. I mean, it's the one and only latitude that at a 90 degree, I don't know if that's the idea as a point of origin in aeronautics or space exploration, but somewhere in my mind it seemed to be involving, the geographics of Australia, Sydney, Australia, and some SID number going through, Harris ultimately, the thing about even in my mind the alphanumerics of Harris in Egypt and Israel that way, and the SID being automatically in my mind like Sydney, and the exact opposite of the NEY is the E, the YEN, and the Japanese yen, and 71 in Pearland, the thing about Disney and all that information. But the thing is that ultimately a PG-13 rating seemed to be the presidential, governors and the PG-13 rating and all that alphanumeric of 99 with the alphanumeric value of 13 and parental guidance, and what that has meant, or whether or not if they only thought about parental guidance is making a grade even beyond business laws, really what the issue seems to be sometimes. But in any case, so the Boolean chart, when I was like reading it for the first several times, and I'd realized that there had been, that information and, some idea of like, thing that seemed to be like, it's going to, obviously something needs to be, a little bit different about, providing multiple choices about, the imagination of Houston equating some idea of a Pearland, Texas home, or the alphanumerics of 112, or some idea of like, finding the unknown being 112, like the biggest thing about like algebra, okay? Or, the fashion statement is kind of like, are you really trying to dress for like cosmetics and some idea like, charades and all that? Yeah, so like anyway, okay. In any case, so like I was thinking about that Boolean because it seemed to be whether or not if the thing about the prefix of the White House being 4, 5, and 6 and the Boolean, I mean, if that's really going to represent some idea of similarities of like programming, sequencing, characterization in sets of 4, in computer programming, a binary numbers yet the Boolean and I think it's showing 6 numbers, okay? How true that is, I mean, I know what I'm saying, okay, but like when I was reading the information on it, it didn't really compute to sequencing. Somewhere between Marcus Welby and Quincy, a medical power of attorney using a fixture in real estate as a deed restriction, and what television programming is, now seem to be, the alphanumeric 6 and the 6 digits of the Boolean reflecting, the thing about, in my mind, automatically, like the presidential number of the numeric value of 6 and, the alphanumeric value being 52, SIX, okay? And now it's kind of like I'm thinking about, the 6 numbers that look similar and are only 2 numbers, 0 and 1. How true that is, I mean, I'll know when I know, okay? Or if it's an idea of airspace or going beyond maritime law, or what signal strength is as compared to redundant frequency, or the idea of the horseshoe representing the ohms, the omega, or the thing about, 8 ohms representing infinity on the zoom lens, ultimately pi r squared and squared being 2 90-degree right angles in the infinite lines that based upon, the description of its intended use of pi r squared about the radius, being used times 3.1416 to get the diameter being like a 0 or an O. The square itself, based upon knowing that information applied to itself, is like, 2 90-degree right angles and the infinite lines, and it actually creates another circle, a 0. So it's almost like the computation and accuracy of alphanumerics, yet in linguistics, it's like the accuracy of like analytical and symbolic, making a grade both ways that way. Like M is N, and if 13 is 14, 14 is 13, alphanumerics of like 55. Heaven in the sky, I tend to use those more so when M is N is the thing, okay? Because 13 is 14, then IS being 28, and 14 is 55. But the thing with this is that, I mean, if it's ultimately getting to whether or not if appreciation or depreciation is only the issue of not knowing anything about the Boolean, as compared to, computer programming. I mean, if it's ultimately the idea of Orion performance monitoring, the America Online issue of the O and AOL and Orion becoming Arian and Aryan Sky Angel Batten, going beyond maritime law of Internet Protocol of a local area network and maritime law. I mean, is it that really the Boolean is some idea that would represent maybe something beyond, maritime law of Internet Protocol of a local area network? I mean, if that's the only thing about it, I mean, that's what I'm really fixing to start maybe considering thinking about, maybe even looking at. I mean, it's identified, and I was reading it and was trying to grasp something about it. It just wasn't quite clicking with the information that was provided at the time. And maybe this is just my idea of like making a grade, and maybe that's going to start happening, or some idea of accurate. How true it is, I'm not real sure, but the thing with this, it seemed to be, based upon my birth year being 1964, or ultimately even the Social Security Administration's number being 12 and 13, it ultimately gets to, 64 and 65, or if it just has to be a Kobe 1819, or the thing about, um, a cumulative rollover being, 1964, 1965 being 83 and 84. And ultimately, it's automatically the thing about, in my mind, the chapter winners and losers of, in the Secret of the Temple, how the Federal Reserve runs the country. And now it seems to be, the chapter winners and losers um, has a whole different perception when McDonald's Golden Arches um, would both have cycles above, the equator, the operator, the oscillation, the center line of oscillation, and apply to that one cycle of frequency, being the side by side thing looking like the electronic schematic fish. And now it seems to be information even on a classified ad as an interview involving in my mind automatically now, because I've seen Vortec engine of like General Motors spelt with like an X and a C, and it seemed to be the connectivity now, all this information, and now it's the BlueWing and the BlueWing and the black and blue thing of like Sammy Hagar and like the OU812 like compact disc and that song Black and Blue, and the Chris Tomlin thing about Holy Forever. I mean, it's like, I mean, for real, like the mind's eye thing about that video being used that way somewhere that I'm thinking about like going through it, okay? And it seemed to be like and Bryan Adams, that song Thought I Died and Gone to Heaven, okay? And the thing with this is that it's out in the middle of a field, out in the middle, I don't even know where it's at. And I remember something about that. I mean, all the stuff I'm talking about was like a memory that this didn't quite be the immediate, because I mean, I knew it had been gassed and fumigated and all that, while I was asleep, and like a 6 to 9 month period happened. I mean, I knew a lot of stuff was going on, but it wasn't quite, I mean, yeah, but anyway, I'd mentioned that, but I'm not going to go off in that direction right now. But the thing is that the black and blue and the whales, and the thing with this is that in the video it shows like a projector in the background shining what would be, a projected light onto what would be more than likely to be some type of silk screen. Yet the thing with this is that with a hologram, I'm not sure if a hologram has any other requirement than its projection, not depending or having a need or a requirement for like a silk screen or anything of density that would be give some idea of an effect, maybe if not complete transparency, like uh, the fabric being the idea of how many threads are in a silk screen, or something like maybe drops of water or rain or sprinkler system, or even a fog machine presenting. But it looks like the projector in the background that's showing in the video of Bryan Adams' video Thought I Died and Gone to Heaven. Somewhere in my mind's eye, only seeing the whales, all that stuff about the dolphins didn't seem to be like really it at all. But it seemed to be ultimately, like the American DJ thing about, Moby, the DJ for like KLOL, FM 101.1 FM rock radio station, and ultimately going to 97 rock. Moby's, name as a personality on like the radios, Moby, automatically, it's automatic thought of that Moby Dick and the FDIC is automatically some idea in my mind automatically now of those whales and Moby, and his name about, and it just kind of like clicks in my mind with all the connectivity about the FDIC and the front lines of the beach run and out in the field and all the information. It ultimately seemed to be, that the whales represent some idea, even of, some idea of some on par, country club of like hors d'oeuvres and caviar, making it beyond the front lines of the beach run, beyond the primate spawning and color code, like a bunch of black dots on the map. But anyway, I was kind of like thinking about that because it seemed to be that Moby having a bunch of beachfront, like on East Beach and like Stewart Beach, having a bunch of live broadcasts, simulcast. And that one particular video, it just seemed to be that somewhere in my mind that it didn't have a projector. I really don't remember any light that looked like it was in a background projecting to a silk screen. And I'm not sure if a hologram um, can do something uh, that big out in the middle of the field without maybe being dependent or a requirement of like a silk screen. My perception of like holograms is extremely limited, and what I've only seen on television, I'm not even sure if that's even accurate. Yeah, for real. So I'm not gonna say any much more about that, but it seemed to be the only difference between whether if a projector in Brian Adams' video is really a projector or really a hologram, or maybe just a different angle, maybe more so along the line of the ground, other than maybe in the background at like you know the eye level, yeah, and maybe at a different angle, maybe more so, maybe a little bit below the weeds a little bit, or whatever the case is, or maybe even above it, yeah. So like it's kind of like thinking about that. But anyway, the bullying thing seemed to be that if it's going to be 6 characters, and if it's going to be the idea of making a grade beyond internet protocol of a local area network of maritime law, I mean, automatically the BooleanChart seemed to be like whether or not if a preliminary prejudice of product registration of a birth certificate ultimately gets to WE International and the weather and the forecast, and obviously the spore stone, and you know, I didn't even realize I'd been operating on, or like 4 inches of my humerus bone in between my shoulder and elbow. I mean, I noticed a difference. I mean, really, I did. But considering everything that was going on at the time, I wasn't within the physical or mental thing about it because of the duration going through like a very intense time about some like extreme, incoherence. By the time I was actually, feeling like um, consciously to acknowledge some idea of like uh, uh, not a very good feeling type of a, consistent going on for like really months after, that period. Not even realizing that a duration had taken place that, I mean, while it was happening, I mean, I kind of like knew it, but it was kind of happening so much and so frequent. I didn't have time to dwell upon having any concept of like memory. It was just like another day and something new, and nothing else mattered. It was just like making it through the day kind of thing, But um, in any case, so like I was thinking about that, and what the deal is about the bullying, the BlueWing. And if the Dr. Pepper is the only thing about the 23-year celebration and the anniversary celebration, Dr. Pepper being the 23rd year, or the W, or Dr. Pepper just representing some idea of a medical power of attorney, using a fixture in real estate as a deed restriction based upon television programming, or the 23 ingredients and the 23-year anniversary celebration being 23, the W. Um, a medical power, and what Quincy is, and Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shadow Government Stargate program. And seemingly now it seems to be maybe there's the connectivity of the kernel and the kennel, and the thing about whether or not if a partition in proper English numerical composition is only representing the kennel and what a central processing unit is, of a kernel that's normally involving some idea of like architecture platform embedded in encryption. Obviously television programming as well now seems to be the BooleanChart. I was just thinking about that because it has 6 digits of characterization, and very well be maybe something I maybe start looking into. There seems to be whether or not going through that it's just the idea of Chevrolet Corvette, the veterinarian, and Arian, and AOL being the idea of like Orion performance monitoring, the Apple and Oracle thing in my mind automatically of like America Online. Um, and the Orion becoming the Arian and Arian. I mean, just knowing what I do about just knowing the alphanumerics of my name and everything. Because here's the thing about Arian Scribes of Latin. When I decided that maybe I need to look for a name that's beyond the thought of my name being, I was kind of like stuck on, who is am I going to be confronted with the front lines of the beachfront? I mean, forever over my name, or wade fishing, or some idea of like naval or surfing the internet, And I started looking for, in my mind automatically it was the at a minimum amphibious about J. Edgar Hoover thing about being amphibious and above hydroplaning, and surfing the internet, and something more aeronautic yet, and ultimately I mean I went through like hundreds of names I never even heard of. Predominantly is really where I started. Is looking for names, just any name other than what I've ever known or heard. Okay. Um, and Arian's kind of that, and ultimately, I mean, I've heard, quite a bit, uh, indirectly And I knew the alphanumerics in my own name like already, but it took me probably about um, maybe 6 to 8, maybe 10 months, and then like picked up years later and finally decided that the perfect amphibious name and everything about entering heaven and the word transfiguration, on Mount Olives and all this information, the plateau, and all that that one word Thessalonians being the transfiguration applied to a new accomplice, and all the Eurodollar about that symbolic representation, and that word transfiguration applied to the alphanumerics of 204, a new accomplice equaling 12, or like region 1 and 2, and the Eurodollar, given the implication of the halo, the left side of that symbolic representation between the C and a PTIS. And all that was like clicking in my mind, hey, it's kind of like, it's like, almost like, all the information is available information. I mean, even finding significance in a way, like I'm referring to. I mean, when I really got involved with, like, getting serious about, alphanumerics, I mean, I never really even stopped. I did it so much that really it's kind of like fascinated, then, like impressed, then fascinated, and then, that went on for like about a year and a half. Wow, that's not a joke. And I never really stopped, really, truthfully. But there for like, several years. I mean, it's like nonstop. I mean, day and night as often as possible. Um, but in any case, so like now it seems to be whether or not if making a grade beyond a local area network of internet protocol of maritime law is really the BooleAnchart. And somewhere in my mind, automatically, I think of Van Halen and the video of Dreams, and the the Blue Angels, and this coupon LASIK laser corrective eye surgery. And now I'm kind of like looking at what in the beginning was in my mind, a singular difference. And something about names of authors and certain information, it really gets, I mean, beyond really extremely frustrating. Such as an author of like Principles of Digital Audio, and I've had William Pullman and Ken Pullman, and it's really getting a little frustrating about thinking that the kernel and proper English numerical composition, or a 16-digit number on a debit card, even a prepaid card, is some idea, the American Express Bluebird card. I mean, even the ethnic background has got to the McDonald's golden arches representing gold. Or the Chico stick, I mean, for real. I mean, it seemed to be the thing about, the American Express Bluebird card and the gold edge. I mean, it's almost like a political science drum major of the Chico stick being the color code of the edge on the card, or a right wing or a left wing issue. Now, and in addition, just like now, the BooleanChart being a 6-digit number, and automatically, I mean, I've done alphanumerics and linguistics that long that automatically when 6 is involved, it's like the presidential number, numerical and like alphanumeric, involving the 52 thing about a VPN, the heart, and not limited to the pearl, and all that information about American history, Calamity Jane, and the Pony Express representing some idea of the horseshoe and the 8 ohms. Ultimately get into perfect 1010 about the infinite lines in the figure 8, and infinity on the zoom lens, and even in the planetarium, a perfect 1010 vision using the stars. Well, anyway, so like now it's in my mind that the BooleanChart and the BlueWing, or the lean, it's kind of like now it's kind of like the thing about something about Make America Great Again, because I was kind of like wondering, because this home, I'd mentioned that it's kind of like, I didn't even remember a thing about it, but this home was like here and then tore down. I mean, like 1965 seemed to be something about, I mean, all that happening, and how true it is. I'm not sure if it's an immediate thing, but I knew that like here in Pearland, the specific address, and I didn't even remember it. All of a sudden, it's like the Barbara Walters and Hugh Downs thing about the view, and the pastel colors, as a matter of fact, was like a salad bowl and a baby blue pastel. And obviously, someone had been like walking in and out, throughout different years about a pastel bowl. And while my parents was alive, I mean, it didn't mean anything about someone having access and just walking in and putting a plastic bowl. But anyway, the pastel thing's like a 1960s predominant thing about colors, even like Tupperware. In this case, a baby blue, a pastel blue salad bowl that was in the pantry. And like when I was like had it in my hand, looking through the window towards the street, I mean, all of a sudden, the memory of being like an infant in diapers, and like before I even remembered even coming back here with my parents, even if it is the same parents, I mean, for real. In any case, built this home, didn't remember, I mean, not one thing about it. And, I was kind of like going, and moving back to Pearland with my parents, like in 1969, and knowing this much about this area, I mean, it was like just a wide open field. So, I mean, going in and out of a circuit, for quite some time, seeing huge commercial buildings built and tore down. I mean, renovation and, now you see it, now you don't, now you're going in, now you're coming out. And, all that information about, going through the circuit and going on, for quite some time. And seeing huge buildings uh, built and just like, where'd it go? I mean, that was kind of like, my thought, like, when I got on YouTube, like, beginning of the year 2020. And, I mean, I wasn't really thinking about Barbara Walters or 2020. Um, but when someone put that plastic pastel baby blue, and all of a sudden it's kind of like, I was here, like, in diapers, and didn't remember, I mean, anything from, like, when we moved back here, when this home was actually completed enough, like, December of, like, 1978. And it still wasn't even finished at the time. And we're still, like, working on it, okay? And through all that, and all the years, I mean, all the years, and both my parents had already passed away. Like, my mother passed away, like, in January, the day of Barack Obama's inauguration on January 21st, like, I think it was, 2009. And then my father passed away, like, in May of 2018. It was after both of them passed away, and all this other stuff was, like, going on. Um, then I realized for the first time, because when I was, like, putting myself on YouTube with my drums and this lighting, and what you're seeing is, um, I mean, I have a considerable amount more than what you're looking at now, but I think I have like a really good, um, lighting setup. And in any case, so like, when I was like on YouTube with my drums, and for 2 years, in beginning in 2022, I mean, like I was riding my bicycle, like really working on, my cardiovascular, and then all this stuff about, like in the drains and like the air quality and what's going on in like issues for about a 16-month period. Might be something of maybe a 16-year period. And the 1 month I didn't have to call 911 or go to the hospital during a 16-month period, the 15th month. And the thing about face value is automatically in my mind is coupon of like LASIK laser corrective eye surgery and a 15-digit number of the American Express Bluebird card. And now it seems to be like the Aerosmith song about living on the edge. I mean, it's got to the point whether if that card is representing, some technical difficulties of whether it's a right wing or a left wing, like edge, and some barcode of ethnic background, and the Freddie Prinze chickle stick, and some political science drum major, and some, idea that, because we here at Colonial Penn have changed our name to the almost artesian columnist, adjusting, the Pinocchio barcode, only to discover that Annette Pinicello is Pinocchio. I mean, for real, it's kind of like, based upon pronunciation of her last name, Pinicello, or some idea of the square and pi r squared being the idea of like two 90-degree right angles, or the pi, the r being radius, and automatically apply to like, it seemed to be the H in her name, like Vic's Formula 44 or the 44 thing, representing the DD on the driver's license, or even apply to, like the misappropriation allocation of the Mississippi and the ISS and the SSI being the IDSS and the SSDI, and all the information being involved with like supplemental security income, and the color code of the 1040 EZ form representing some idea of like at one point of non-taxable income, when in fact a prepaid tax, it would only mean whether or not if it's considered enough to have to pay taxes at all, or pay taxes and like get a full reimbursement. It represents almost the same similarities, but isn't, of like supplemental security that's non-taxable income. Somewhere in between the ERISA statute, the Apple iPhone SE, and the IRS, and the color code, between the black and blue thing, it seemed to be, ultimately leading to the jurisprudence in the black back, of jurisprudence representing, in my mind, some idea of like the word repudiation, and color code of state statutes annotated. And, whether or not if television program is a deed restriction based upon that one word of warehousing, repudiation, involving state statutes annotated in the black books, even, the constitutional law being a black book, and ultimately, real estate and what that is in real estate as compared to warehousing. That one word, repudiation, and jurisprudence, the black back, it seemed that all that information is reflecting some idea of, a medical power of attorney using fixture in real estate as a deed restriction based upon television programming, what litigation, de facto, and res habeas corpus seem to have all that connectivity in my mind. I mean, I've done a lot of looking and reading, and that's automatically the way, 10, 15 years of just, studying and going through some really not normal conditions, really. But, thinking about everything like as in proper English numerical composition, alphanumerically, numerically, alphanumerically, analytically, symbolically, involving, proper English numerical composition, like the P being visible pronounced and P being visible and silent, actually apply to the R likewise in addition. This one particular thing about Annette Penicello and her name being, in pronunciation like cello. And the one thing about the H being the 8, knowing that the figure 8 is automatically like a pi r squared thing based upon the principle of knowing that a degreed description of intended use of pi r squared is a definition, a degreed definition of its intended use. Normally in alphanumerics and linguistics, it's not even taught. Linguistics is, but I mean, even the way linguistics is taught, it normally hadn't given any implication based upon any information that I know of on any college or university that alphanumerics is even available, I mean, in any kind of way. So, I mean, all that analytical and symbolic, stuff combined in my mind is automatically the deal about Annette Penicello's name and being the idea of H being 8 or the figure 8 and the pi r squared, and knowing that about the figure 8 is ultimately, the combine of the radius being, multiplied by to itself twice with 3.14, and, getting the diameter of a circle, yet in pronunciation symbolically and analytically, the square, and knowing that the formula works, and that's what it means. It's like 2 90-degree right angles of infinite lines, and ultimately the second zero, the second circle, on an analytical symbolic way of that formula. And that's the thing, that's when I really started studying alphanumerics and linguistics, both analytically, linguistically, and alphanumerically. As likewise, in addition, the M is in thing about the M is and N are the two center letters, and combining it, with the IS, and now it seems to be the thing about Fort Stockton, Texas, and Ector being like the sector guitar or the Ibanez S series, and the line 6. Okay, line 6. I think. Let me think about it. 6 being 52, and the word line is like, I think it's 92, 52, 62, 64, 73, 83, 87, 88, 89, 99. Yeah, it's 92, like a drummer. The guitar amp. Okay, line 6 V series. Okay, and all this information is saying when I said to James and all unit and seeing that rainbow. The identical twin rainbow, okay? I mean, unlike any other, I mean, I guarantee you, it would be, my thought automatically one in an entire lifetime for real, and on the exact opposite in the Fort Stockton, Texas area, the plateau, and everything that, like, I was like really thinking about involving the history of a television screen, or like Close Encounters of the Third Kind, or some idea of color code. Now, the Pacey color sound 900 symbols. Yet at the same time, it seemed to be, like the Michael Jackson, hopscotch technology of the song Billie Jean. And, the John Travolta Saturday Night Fever thing about, too much action on disco on a toilet, the humor about, the toilet, the lid being like a disco, yeah. But anyway, so like too much action on a discotheque, okay? But anyway, it seemed to be the atonement thing about the color code. And now it seemed to be like Green Acres, just like, da 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 da, identifying, like some idea of like some like jukebox and a jewelry box representing those little bumps, and like 232s, like the Lockheed Martin, intersecting axis, and like some telepathic blueprint of international financial management of like some telepathic blueprint on a wall based upon a shelf on the exact opposite side. Going, off into the fifth dimension in my mind, an eccentric fifth dimension, like eccentric triangle with the same idea and pronunciation of like Lockheed Martin, with all like, the 2 arrows and the 4 lines and the 3 intersecting axes, except this eccentric triangle is like the screensaver that bounces off the the outer edge of the monitor, and it's eccentric, okay? And there's only two of them, but they overlap and they bounce, and it changes its eccentric, perception, the way it looks. Yet the eccentric lines is kind of like it presents the 8 sides being the 2 eccentric triangles. Automatically, that's like a total of 8, and pi r squared in the infinite lines of 2 90-degree right angles based upon the square and pronunciation in the formula, not even used with its definition of intended use, but based upon pronunciation, you know that the infinite lines is automatically going to result in some idea of a perfect 10-10 vision in the way of like the figure 8 and the pi r squared, of degree to intended use, and the Alpha-American linguistic side of like the square itself, and the 290 degrees, of infinite lines on ultimately the infinity thing about the zoom lens and the planetarium using stars for perfect 10-10. It's got that combine of like symbolic and analytical that way, and it seems to be the thing like right now with Annette Penichelo's name and that 8 being the thing about 44 or Vic's formula 44, or in my mind the word hidden. And the one scripture, I mean for real, not even in the concordance, the word of God is hidden in the heart. Oh gee, thanks. I had to read the entire King James Version Bible just to find out, and I go, you mean that's all there is? Gee, thanks. So like I read the entire book just to find out, okay? Gee, thanks. That's like really nice. But alphanumerically, that word hidden is like 44, okay? And in real estate, inadvertently, based upon my preteens, when escrow, I hadn't heard anyone talk about escrow in so long, it's unreal. But, involving real estate, it was like involving, real estate agents and discussed in my preteens during when my parents sold their home. And I'm like hearing all this information. I'm just listening to it and don't think anything of it. And just forgot, and just went out and rode my bike, And for like 15, 20 years later, it's kind of like all of a sudden the significance in my mind of just hearing the way they talked about it. And my preteens had the significance of the word hidden and indirect, inadvertent, thing about escrow being almost like hidden. It's like the word of God's hidden in our heart, and escrow being 78, and the heart God being 78. And the thing about the heartbeat of America in my mind is kind of like escrow being the alphanumeric 78 or zip code, or thing about a heart God, the exact opposite of 87, the truth. Ultimately, a new accomplice. Yay, all right. Mine's transfiguration being 12, or region 1 and region 2 of the euro dollar, or the 12 being the truth, or miracle God, and the exact of 87 is 78, and all the stuff. So like anyway, I want to include that. It's already going on, God, close to an hour already. But I'm gonna think about the Boolean. I'm gonna think about maybe read a little bit of information if it's gonna be what I need to know. For real. And it seemed to be the right now that the quantum in my memory that one time at Commandos on the north side of Houston on FM 1960, the one and only time, and when I was looking at it, I was just like really flipping on. I didn't even know what to call it. But it was like a live vertical signal processor, and at the time I didn't even compute the quantum or anything live or auditing legal media or some idea of quantum in the military. And or even Diners Club, Alpha 107, or like right here on County Road 107, Pearland, Texas. My street being Mona Street, 3611. The thing with this is that in this one particular section, there's like 5 or 6 roads and streets, and that's County Road 107. From like 8, I think it's A to H. I actually have to think if it's a GH or 107. 107A, B, C, D. I think it goes all the way to G or H. And I think it has actually been just 107A, and not individually as 107 itself. And then 107A, all the way to like H or G, whatever it's been. I really hadn't been paying attention. I did notice that much about just like living here and knowing that I normally ignore normal stuff like right in front of me sometimes. For real. And not even realize, like, where's it at? It's like, I'm looking at it, for real, it's like really not funny sometimes. But anyway, I was kind of like thinking about that because you see now that making a great beyond local area network of internet protocol might be the J. Edgar Hoover, the amphibious thing about, getting beyond the American Idol of pilots that don't require a license to fly and be a pilot, like the American Idol very well may be. You know, thought somewhere beyond like transportation, 800 RPM of like motor vehicles on the highway. That's normally the American Idol standard of 800 RPMs or the 1-800 number. And now it seems to be the BooleanChart thing about the BlueWing or you know the deal about a colonel being some idea of like Dr. Pepper or Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government Stargate Program, and the difference between what a colonel is or is not. Um, I mean the telekinetic roll of the pen. I mean anyone like has heard anything about the telekinetic roll of the pen and all that telekinesis and telekinetic thing about mind power. Using pen, rolling it on the table. Okay, the thing with it is that I mean, you know, to me, that's information, okay, that can be used analytically, okay. And it's still just not quite the grade to me, but I mean, without that information, wouldn't grasp maybe something about going through a circuit or the colonel being a kennel or the thing about, you know, RCA mascot or anything about, you know, the Alphameric's of 26 or God Game Card Lie or the Chevrolet Corvette or the veterinarian or the pronunciation of Aryan, the Corvette or the veterinarian and Aryan. Um, and it seemed to be the connectivity of like Dr. Pepper now, being the 23 ingredients, and the one and only that I know of any American product involving additives, preservatives, and byproducts, or like any food, FDA approved, is that, you know, Dr. Pepper's like the only one I know of, like in my entire lifetime, that celebrated a 23-year anniversary celebration. And the 23 ingredients are 23 ingredients of Dr. Pepper. And now it seems to be the deal about, you know, the black and blue or, you know, the Abraham Lincoln Night Vision Shuttle Government Stargate Program and what would be, you know, like the BlueWing of Boolean with 6-digit characterization similar to the binary numbers of like computer programming and language being sequencing characterization in sets of 4, all using 2 numbers being the binary numbers in sets of 4. Now I'm just now like really wanting to get serious about, you know, the Boolean and I mean, is it really the Boolean? The BOOLE? Or is it like an airspace idea in need of being amphibious and J. Edgar Hoover and the hovercraft and the Hoover, the hover? Seem to be, so like I'm going to like really direct some time, really that direction now to see if it's going to be the thing about the American Idol or, you know, going beyond maritime law of a local area network of internet protocol and seem to be maybe some. Yeah, so like I'm gonna kind of like stop right there right now and I want to include that right there. But anyway, yeah, there it is. Okay, have a good night. Yeah.